imagine like a mid-level bureaucrat today, right?
Yeah.
And he just sets up a printer in his basement, prints out a bunch of fake federal licenses, completely bypasses the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then boldly claims that the Statue of Liberty magically flew from New York and landed in his backyard.
That sounds like a ridiculous movie plot.
Right.
You'd expect that guy to be locked up immediately.
Exactly. But the wild thing is, the government just lets him get away with it. Like, they actually make his fake licenses the law of the land.
It is genuinely hard to believe.
But that is exactly what happened in 15th century Japan. A guy named Yoshida Kanetomo pulled off, honestly, one of the most audacious theological heists in human history. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are looking at this fascinating stack of historical texts, some amazing academic papers, and basically centuries of Japanese history. And our mission for you today is to uncover this dark, centuries-long turf war for religious power in Japan.
Yeah, and to really understand the sheer scale of this heist, we have to look at what was actually being stolen. We got to revisit a concept we've touched on before.
Oh, right, the Hanchi Sujaku.
Exactly, Hanchi Sujaku.
So for anyone new to this, or just as a quick refresher, think of Hanchi Sujaku like a computer operating system.
I love this analogy.
Right, because for centuries, Japan operated on this beautifully synchronized theological software. The imported powerhouse of Buddhism was the underlying source code, like the back end, what they called the true form, or the root.
Yes.
And the native Japanese kami, the local gods, were just the front-end user interface. They were the temporary traces, or local avatars.
That is a super accurate way to visualize it. It was basically the ultimate theological compromise.
Yeah, it kept the peace.
It really did. It allowed Buddhism to sit comfortably at the absolute top of the cosmic hierarchy without, tearing Japanese society apart. Because the native gods were still honored, they were just seen as localized manifestations of universal Buddhas.
Everyone had a job.
Right. Everyone and every single deity had their specific place on the cosmic org chart.
But, software that runs perfectly for the executives doesn't always make the users happy.
Oh, absolutely not.
So today we're exploring this radical, world-flipping idea that kind of bubbled up from the resentment built into that hierarchy, a movement that essentially said, no, we're rewriting the source code. The kamis are actually the root, and the Buddhas are just the traces.
Yeah, and the ideological magma for this massive volcanic backlash had been bubbling for a really long time. Because, reversing the cosmic hierarchy isn't just some polite academic debate over tea.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It is a literal declaration of war. This theological flip sparked a bitter, centuries-long battle for control over Japan's soul, and frankly, it had massive political and economic stakes.
But I'm stuck on the logistics of this. How do you even begin to convince a society that has placed Buddhas at the absolute pinnacle of the universe for centuries just suddenly flip the script?
It is not easy.
You can't just post a manifesto on a temple door and expect the whole country to change its mind.
You certainly cannot. To pull off a societal shift of that magnitude, you generally need a massive catalyst.
Like a disaster.
Exactly. You need a severe national crisis, followed by a truly brilliant piece of theological rebranding. So if we look at the period from the Kamakura to the Nambokucho eras, so we're talking roughly the late 13th to 14th centuries, Japan faced this terrifying existential threat, the Mongol Invasions, or the Genko.
Okay, right. We're talking about the fleets of Kublai Khan here.
Yes.
I always try to imagine the sheer psychological terror of that moment. You are an island nation. You haven't faced a major foreign invasion in recorded history.
Right.
And suddenly, tens of thousands of hardened, world-conquering troops just appear on the horizon.
The terror was absolute. It was apocalyptic for them. And when a nation is threatened by an overwhelming foreign power like that, the populace naturally looks for protection from their most ancient native protectors.
They pray to the home team.
Exactly. They prayed to the kami. And then something miraculous happened. Massive typhoons destroyed the Mongol fleets. Not once, but twice.
Wow. The kamikaze, right? The divine winds.
Yes, the kamikaze. And the psychological impact of those typhoons, it just cannot be overstated. It completely cemented the idea of Japan as a Shinkoku.
A divine land.
A divine land uniquely protected by the native gods. So suddenly, the prestige of the kami skyrockets, and the people who really recognized this immense shift in the political and spiritual winds were the priests of the Watarai clan.
Okay, let's contextualize them for a second. The Watarai clan was based at the Ise shrine. specifically the Geiku, or the outer shrine. And Ise is essentially like the Vatican of Shinto, right?
Yeah, that's a fair comparison. It is the most sacred Shinto site in Japan, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu. And these Watarai priests of the outer shrine, they began systematizing this concept called Shinpan Butsujaku.
Which literally translates to what? Kami as the root, Buddhas as the traces?
Exactly. The complete opposite of the old system. But an idea needs authority to actually stick, right? So the Watarai priests essentially forged a series of texts known as the Shinto Gubusho.
Wait.
Yeah.
They just sat down and forged ancient sacred texts. Didn't anyone notice the ink was still wet?
Well, you have to remember, in the medieval period, the concept of intellectual property and historical authenticity was a lot more fluid than it is today.
Fluid is a nice word for it.
True. But if an idea felt spiritually true, attributing it to an ancient sage or a deity was seen as, revealing a hidden truth rather than committing a crime.
Oh, I see. It's like retroactively giving it the weight of history.
Exactly. But you're touching on a crucial vulnerability here. The Watarai clan's ideas were mostly just localized assertions. They lacked the robust, sophisticated intellectual framework they really needed to dismantle the deeply entrenched Buddhist philosophy that ruled the educated elites.
Right, because the elites are all thoroughly trained in Buddhist logic.
Exactly. They needed an insider, someone who understood the Buddhist source code well enough to rewrite it.
And that brings us to a Tendai Buddhist monk named Jihen. I gotta admit, when I was looking through the sources, this totally stopped me in my tracks.
It's surprising, isn't it?
Yeah. Why on earth is a high-ranking Buddhist monk helping to demote his own religion?
It really comes down to political survival and personal ambition. Jihen was a brilliant thinker, but within the massive, crowded hierarchy of Tendai Buddhism, he was somewhat overshadowed.
He hit a glass ceiling.
Basically, yeah. And he saw the political winds shifting toward the kami after the Mongol invasions. He found patrons among the court nobility who were leaning heavily into this new Shinto nationalism.
So he pivoted.
He totally pivoted. By carving out a uniquely pro-kami theology, Jihen secured his own relevance and his own patronage. He took the Watarai's basic kami-first concept and expanded it into this masterpiece of rhetorical framing. It's called the Konyo Kajitsuron.
The root, leaf, flower, fruit theory. Okay, I want to spend some time here because the rhetorical judo of this theory is just fascinating to me. Break down this whole root, leaf, flower, fruit concept for us.
All right, so according to Jihen's theory, the entire spiritual ecosystem of the world is a single cosmic plant.
Okay, tracking.
Japan and its native Shinto gods represent the seed and the root of all spiritual truth. China and its core philosophy of Confucianism represent the branches and the leaves.
And then India and Buddhism.
India, along with Buddhism, are merely the flowers and the fruit.
It's so subtle. They didn't outright reject Buddhism or Confucianism. They validated that they exist, but they just completely changed their position on the org chart.
It's brilliant framing.
It is. But I need you to clarify the mechanism of this metaphor for me. Because, well, in my mind, the fruit is kind of the ultimate goal of a plant, right?
Sure.
It's the highest achievement, the sweetest part. How does calling Buddhism the fruit actually subordinate to the root?
Okay, think about the biological life cycle of a plant. Yes, a flower blooms beautifully and a fruit ripens, but what inevitably happens to that fruit?
It falls off the branch.
Exactly. It falls, it hits the ground, it decomposes, and its ultimate purpose is to feed and return to the root.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Jihen used this biological inevitability to explain the entire geographical trajectory of Buddhism across Asia.
So the physical movement of the religion.
Right. He argued this is precisely why Buddhism moved east from India, through China, and finally arrived in Japan. It wasn't some advanced foreign technology conquering a primitive island.
Wow.
It was the heavy, overripe fruit falling naturally back to its divine root to serve the kami.
That is an astonishing spin. He takes the obvious, undeniable historical fact that Buddhism was imported from the outside and turns it around to say, no, it was just the universe's way of bringing the nutrients back home.
It's incredible, and it provided the intellectual foundation the movement desperately needed. But, ideas, even brilliant ones, don't govern reality all on their own.
Right. Having a great botanical metaphor doesn't give you legal control over thousands of local shrines.
No, it doesn't. To actually control the gods, you need a mastermind willing to play dirty. You need an opportunist who can take an abstract theological concept and turn it into a ruthless institutional monopoly.
Which brings us directly into the chaos of the mid-Muromachi period. And the man I brought up at the very beginning of this deep dive, Yoshida Kanetomo.
The architect of the heist.
This is where the historical landscape physically changes. We really need to set the scene with the Onin War, don't we?
We do. The Onin War, which kicked off in 1467, is basically the great dividing line in Japanese history. It was a catastrophic, decade-long civil war. It essentially burned the capital city of Kyoto to the ground.
Just total devastation.
Total. And the old aristocratic families lost their sprawling estates, their wealth, their grip on power. Now, for centuries, the Japanese shrine world had been ruled from the top down by this elite aristocratic family called the Shirakawa.
Okay, the Shirakawa.
They held the title of Jingihaku, which means the head of the Department of Divinities. But after the Onin War, the Shirakawa were financially ruined. They were politically isolated.
So Kyoto is in ashes, this old mega corporation is bleeding out, and the entire country is descending into a chaotic free-for-all, where warlords are just seizing whatever territory they can grab.
And right into that massive power vacuum steps Yoshida Kanetomo.
Our basement printer guy.
The very same. He was a mid-level official in the Department of Divinities, but he was highly educated, incredibly ambitious, and utterly pragmatic. While the Shirakawa aristocrats were, lamenting their lost elegance, Kanetomo realized something crucial.
What was that?
He realized that whoever organized the shattered pieces of the country's religious network would own the future. He didn't just want a seat at the table, he wanted to own the entire franchise.
And he creates his own brand to do it, Yuitu Shinto?
Yeah.
Which translates to one and only Shinto.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds incredibly exclusive, almost aggressive.
Oh, it was aggressively monopolistic by design. And to enforce his brand, Kanetomo engaged in forgery on an industrial scale. I mean, the Watarai clan forged a few texts centuries earlier, sure, but Kanetomo fabricated an entire legal reality.
He went all in.
He issued fake imperial edicts, known as Sojin Senji, and he started using these fake edicts to grant ranks and licenses to local shrines all across Japan. He completely bypassed the Shirakawa family's traditional authority.
Wait, so in modern business terms, is this like a flashy new startup, the Yoshida family completely stealing the franchise rights out from under a prestigious centuries-old Meiji corporation, the Shirakawa family?
Huh? That is exactly what it is. It's a hostile takeover of cosmic proportions.
That is insane. But surely the mega corporation fought back, right? Like, if the Shirakawa were the legitimate authority, why didn't they just crush this mid-level startup the moment he started printing these fake licenses?
Well, because Kanetomo understood the mechanism of power in a fractured society way better than they did. The Shirakawa were aloof aristocrats. They charged exorbitant fees and required local priests to travel all the way to Kyoto for validation.
Which is probably super dangerous during a civil war.
Exactly. It was impossible. So Kanetomo offered a streamlined, decentralized model. He sent agents out into the provinces. He offered cheaper, faster legitimacy to rural shrines that were just desperate for some kind of official backing in a chaotic world.
Wow, he really is a medieval tech bro. He disrupted the market.
He totally did. On top of that, he was a master networker. He married his daughters into powerful military families. He basically bribed the warlords who actually held the swords.
So he offered a better service to the local branches, and he bought off the regulators. That is ruthless.
And his audacity did not stop with paperwork. He built a highly specific octagonal shrine in Kyoto called the Daigengu, and he boldly claimed that all 3,132 deities recorded across the entire Japanese archipelago were not independent entities.
Wait, what were they?
He claimed they were actually just branch office manifestations of his central Kyoto shrine.
You're kidding. That's the equivalent of declaring every independent coffee shop in America is actually just a franchise of your specific kitchen.
Yep.
And he went even further with the sacred mirrors, didn't he?
He crossed the ultimate line. So the sacred mirrors of the Ise shrine are the most holy relics in Japan.
Right.
Kanetomo claimed that the original mirrors had magically flown through the air to reside at his Daigengu shrine.
He claimed the mirrors flew, which implies that the priests at Ise, the exact people who started this whole Kami First movement in the first place, were now just worshiping empty boxes.
Exactly.
How did the government let him get away with claiming the sun goddess's mirrors literally flew to his backyard?
Well, the Ines priests were furious, obviously. They lodged massive formal protests. But you have to remember, the central government was incredibly weak at this time, and Kanetomo had spent years deeply embedding himself with the military elites of the shogunate.
Oh, right, the networking.
Yeah. He argued his case with such overwhelming conviction and leveraged those political connections so effectively that the shogunate essentially threw their hands up and said, we're not getting involved in a mystical mirror dispute.
Wow.
Kanetomo's fake-it-till-you-make-it strategy actually succeeded.
So the Yoshida startup wins. They completely steal the market share. But, monopolies, especially highly successful ones, they inevitably attract the attention of the state.
They do. Which brings us to the Edo period. By 1665, the Tokugawa shogunate has violently reunified Japan. The centuries of civil war are over.
Right, peace at last. But a very strict peace.
Very strict. The Tokugawa want absolute iron-fisted control over every single aspect of society. They look at the religious landscape and they see Yoshida's massive nationwide network of licensed shrines.
And instead of destroying it, they realize they can use it.
Precisely. The shogunate passes a nationwide law called the Shosha Negi Kanushiharo, the shrine regulations. This law effectively made the Yoshida family the state-backed monopoly.
State?
Yes. It legally forced shrines across the entire country to wear Yoshida-approved robes and buy their licenses directly from the Yoshida family. If you wanted to be a legitimate Shinto priest in Edo period Japan, you paid the Yoshida.
They achieved total market dominance. But, and here's the fatal flaw in their empire. If your entire monopoly is built on forged documents, fake edicts, and absurd claims about flying mirrors, eventually, someone is going to read the fine print.
And the fact-checkers finally arrived. You can suppress critics with political power for a long time, but you cannot stop academic scrutiny forever.
Right.
We enter this era of meticulous historical philologists, scholars like Watarai Nobuyoshi and Yoshimi Yukikazu.
Watarai Nobuyoshi?
Yeah.
Is he a descendant of the Watarai clan from Ise, the ones who originally forged the texts centuries earlier?
The irony is incredibly thick. A descendant of the original Kami First movement is now turning his critical academic eye onto the Yoshida Empire.
That's amazing.
And these Edo period scholars didn't just argue theology. They used forensic textual analysis. They looked at the documents Yoshida Kanetomo claimed were thousands of years old and just pointed out the obvious anachronisms.
Like using words that didn't exist back then.
Exactly. They proved that the grammar and vocabulary used in the texts didn't even exist in ancient Japanese. Furthermore, they proved that Kanetomo had outright plagiarized entire paragraphs directly from Chinese Taoist manuals and Buddhist sutras.
They pulled the foundational code of the Yoshida Empire apart and showed everyone it was just copy-pasted.
Completely copy-pasted.
So they comprehensively debunked the monopoly. What happens next? Does the government just strip Yoshida of their power?
Not immediately, because the Tokugawa shogunate valued stability over historical truth.
Sure.
But it gave the old, ruined megacorporation the ammunition they had been waiting centuries for. By 1743, the old Shirakawa establishment used these devastating academic findings to launch a massive, highly litigious counterattack.
The empire strikes back in the courtroom.
They really did. They launched fierce lawsuits against the Yoshida family. It sparked this bitter market share war over who truly controlled the franchise rights to Japan's shrines. The Shirakawa argued that Yoshida's authority was legally and historically void from the very beginning.
So you have these two legacy institutions, the Yoshida and the Shirakawa, locked in this brutal courtroom battle over licensing fees, dragging out ancient scrolls to prove who gets to collect the dues.
Right.
But while they are fighting over the scraps of the old world, the intellectual landscape of Japan is radically shifting right beneath their feet.
That is the real tragedy of their legal war. While the Yoshida and Shirakawa were busy suing each other, a far more explosive intellectual movement was brewing in the background.
A storm was coming.
A storm that would eventually render their entire licensing debate completely irrelevant and destroy them both.
What was driving this new movement?
It started as an academic rejection of what scholars called karagokoro, which means the foreign mind, or Chinese mind. Scholars like Moturi Norinaga began arguing that all imported logic, whether it was Buddhist metaphysics or Confucian ethics, had polluted the pure, original spirit of Japan.
Because even though Yoshida Kanetomo brilliantly flipped the hierarchy to put the kami on top, he still used Buddhist philosophical frameworks, Taoist rituals, and Chinese structural logic to actually build his massive Shinto system.
Exactly. Yoshida used the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. But these new scholars looked at the Yoshida and the Shirakawa and basically said, we don't want the tools and we don't want the house. It's all tainted.
Wow.
And this purist philosophy was taken to an explosive extreme by a scholar named Hirata Atsutan. His faction created Fukko Shinto, or Restoration Shinto.
And what exactly did restoration look like to them? Like, what were they actually trying to build?
They demanded a total return to a mythical, pre-Buddhist ancient Japan. They envisioned this visceral, non-rational, purely Japanese spirituality. They wanted a Shinto completely stripped of any foreign intellectual architecture whatsoever.
Which is wild because the Yoshida family built this incredibly successful, centuries-long empire by utilizing the mechanics of the outside world. And now these purists are weaponizing that very success against them, saying, you're compromised.
It is the classic danger of an ideological purity spiral. Once you start demanding absolute purity, the revolution inevitably eats its own.
Yeah.
And Harada Asutane's demand for theological purity didn't just remain an academic exercise. It became the most dangerous political fuel in the entire country. It directly fed into the Sono-Joy ideology.
Sono-Joy. Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, the rallying cry that would eventually bring down the entire Tokugawa shogunate.
Yes. The theological demand to purge the foreign mind perfectly mapped onto the political demand to purge foreign influence and restore the emperor to absolute divine power. It became the ideological engine that destroyed the Edo period.
So we've moved from a brilliant botanical metaphor to a forged licensing startup to a corporate lawsuit, and now we are standing on the precipice of a full-blown political revolution.
We are.
How does this centuries-long turf war finally climax?
It climaxes with the total annihilation of the old order. In 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate falls, and the Meiji Restoration takes hold. The radical Harada faction, the absolute purists we just talked about, they don't just stay on the fringes complaining.
You get into power.
They enter the very core of the new Meiji government's religious department.
The radical purists are now in charge of the state apparatus.
And their primary goal is to forcefully, systematically purify Shinto nationwide. In the process, they look at the old, bickering, licensing empires of both the Shirakawa and the Yoshida families, and they simply erase them.
Just wiped out.
Gone. The centuries-old mega-corporation and the highly successful monopoly startup are both instantly swallowed up, stripped of their authority, and replaced by a new, terrifyingly powerful wave of state Shinto.
It is a stunning historical reset. And, you know, to you listening right now, it really makes you question the very nature of tradition.
It definitely should.
Because when we encounter these ancient, unbroken traditions in the modern world, whether it's a religious ceremony or a national symbol or a cultural identity, we just assume there are straight lines stretching back to antiquity.
Right, but they rarely are.
The reality is that so many of these identities are the result of aggressive rebranding. They're forged in real time, constructed from the ashes of corporate-style takeovers, lawsuits, and political usurpations that eventually just get swallowed by the state and given a fresh coat of ancient paint.
History is almost never a clean inheritance. It's almost always an act of continuous construction and destruction. But as we bring this deep dive to a close, we have to look at the immediate physical consequences of this newly constructed state Shinto.
Because the Harada faction's purist ideology now has the backing of a modernizing, centralizing government.
Exactly. They aren't just scholars writing treatises anymore. They have the police force, the military, and the law of the land behind them.
Right.
Which leaves us with a chilling question to consider. When you use the absolute power of the state to violently rip apart gods and Buddhas that have been intimately entangled for over 1,000 years, what happens to Japanese society?
That is the dark horizon we are facing. Because you can't just take a state-sanctioned scalpel to 1,000 years of messy, intertwined religious history and expect a clean break. The attempt to force that ideological purity, to forcefully sever the kami from the Buddhas, is going to unleash immense, catastrophic trauma.
It truly will.
And the bloody reality of that trauma, the Haibutsu Kishaku, the violent anti-Buddhist movement that is about to sweep across Japan, is exactly what we will be exploring in the next chapter of this history. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep questioning the roots of what you see, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.